Hello everybody, this is Brad Dyke, once again doing another technical session. Kind of basically getting some history here for you, and as I've been doing these videos, I've gotten some questions that, based on hardware expertise, which is where I usually reside at. The question that comes to me is, I want to overclock my X, may it be a CPU or GPU and so on. Do you recommend it? And, first we have to understand what is it we're really talking about when it comes to doing that. So the first thing that comes to mind in my set is that everybody needs to understand that a computer is not a box that sits on your desk and is, it has a processor in it and memory and so on. That's a very generalized version of it. The truth of the matter is, a computer tower contains many different types of computers. Specifically, for instance, as you can see with this network card, this network card is actually a completely independent computer that has an input-output bus connection for PCIe, and it basically, no, it doesn't have a mouse and keyboard or monitor, but it is actually a computer. You can even say that this, an ASIC miner, is also nothing more than the same thing as you'd have on your desktop. It's a computer. It's got a processor, it's got cache, RAM, resources, processing load, and so on. Even the most basic version is also the same thing. It has a processor, an ASIC processor to be exact, and memory and resource. Now, you'll also find out at advanced platforms like SAS controllers and so on that this is also what's called an SPU, or storage processing unit, and it processes independently of any other computer component and results in an input-output result. That's it. That would be, in this case, storage. So ASIC mining for cryptic currency output, network connectivity output, GPU, graphics processing unit output, and then as you can see here, the neoclassic i96 Pentium 486DX, classic P2, my favorite processor in the whole wide world, because they got it right, they just couldn't make them fast enough, was the Pentium Pro 6, and the varieties of the i3, i5, i7, i9, Xeon platforms, multiple Xeon levels of processor stacks. And the key thing about this whole process is understanding that if the CPU is sitting on the main logic board and it has an output or an input, an NPU, input-output, SAS, storage processor unit, input-output, GPU, input-output, and, of course, your classic style i7's typical machine processor. So, with that being said, the question is, should I overclock? Well, my statement, knowing hardware and understanding the logic and how much hardware can take, I can say that you shouldn't, unless on a extended version, unless you know that you are ready to let the processors get damaged. Now that relates to heat with GPUs and CPUs. That relates to higher write cycle failures for encrypted currencies. We start seeing dropped stats and other errors occur on the NPU for the networking cards. This is a 10 gig card. And of course, reporting call logic errors on the storage cards. Yes, you can put pressure and make these processors for storage work faster. Same with the NTUs. You can overclock the ASIC processors. And the only one that actually was really good at not allowing it to happen was the i960. And the i960 was an excellent card if you remember the 90s and the early 2000 years. But anyways, the point is, I would not. And this is why I say don't overclock. One, I get it. You only have so much money. But the reality of the fact is, to overclock a processor on the motherboard, it's just basically shortening the life cycle. The integrated circuits are prone to heat. They always will be. And when the environment becomes more heating based and so on, yeah, you spent an extra $35, $40 on a better heat sink. What I would have said is, okay, when you went to the store and you looked at really what you wanted to do, you didn't give yourself an honest review. What you did is you said, oh, I really want this, this, and this, and this, but I see that this i5 is cheaper than the i7 or the i9, so I'm going to go with him and I'm just going to overclock him. Well, you cut the life cycle of an i7 or an i5 in half when you do that. I don't care what anyone says. When you do an integrated circuits relay testing algorithm, which is an older tool, a tool that people don't want you to know about. Basically, it's testing the integration and processing capacities for the integrated circuits, how many are still active, and so on. You see degraded effect. So it isn't worth it unless you're just ready to build a trash machine that you don't really care about, and it's just going to get worse and worse over time as it eventually degrades back to its original performance level. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't overclock. And there are times when you might want to occasionally overclock for a short period of time, like at a frag fest or at a competition or something like that. But the ones I absolutely recommend that you just take a little time, realize that the money you thought you were saving, you didn't. Buy the card, maybe a GPU or a processor or a higher performance NIC card or something like that. Buy the card originally for the specs it was designed for, but get the right card for you, because then you got a full life cycle card that goes roughly, in the case of life cycle for IT gear, it's about 3 to 5 years, opposed to 1 to 3 years. Get the right component you need. You can shave down a little bit on RAM, some, but not much. But just, when you realize it's the i7 you really wanted, you go after the i7. So with that being said, I hope that makes sense to you. Because when you do stress logic, trust me, I tell you, the manufacturers who make this gear make it only to just basically do its job. That's why there's always been grief with Intel and AMD and NVIDIA and so on. They always kind of make the waters a little fuzzy because they really don't want you to overstress it, because you then see how well they really made it. And the reality is, it's not that great. Intel especially. So my suggestion there is take a better look at really what you want to do. Write it down on paper, realize what that looks like in hardware, and start staging your hardware the right way. And that way, when the system goes in, it will run cool, not hot. It will do its job, and it will have a little bit of extra breathing space, because over time, processors need that breathing space because they do slowly break down. And that you've got nice longevity on that system. And when it comes time to just get more, then it's time for a new motherboard and a new processor. I actually endorse that in this particular case. So, one last thing. Another question came at me as well. I got a 15,000 RPM hard drive, and I want to overclock it in a way. Well, unfortunately, you can't. Yes, a hard drive is also a computer. When you look at the bottom of it, you can see the computer matrixing for the chipset and the interface and the caching. It is a computer all by itself, but it's a closed loop computer. So what you have to do is, you see this little this SAS controller. This is just a HBA SAS controller. You need one of these. So when you want to speed up hard drives, you go to a cache controller or a cache HBA that will write all your stuff to memory, and then later, but slower, it will write from memory to the hard drive. But there is no way to overclock a hard drive, not legally. You could technically take it apart and play with the jumpers, but I would not recommend it. All right, well, this is Brad Dyke signing off. I hope you like. Here's a quick shot of my processors. I have many, 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 many more. But this kind of brings back some old times, realizations, and also, if anybody can remember, let me know if you know or remember an i960 or a 386 SX or a 486DX, and of course the classic Pentium, which is what it is. I'll let you guys go and have a good day. Bye.